Get started here. Okay. So before I jump into what we're going to do today, was there anything that, did anyone come up with any questions from last time? Anything they wanted to go over before we continue on with some new stuff?
No,
Okay.
I don't think anyone had any specific questions. Maybe today if we can just, just work on just maybe building one from scratch, and we can just come up with a scenario
Yep,
later
definitely.
on. Yeah.
And Sue gave me quite a few ones that we can look at. I just want to go through some tools first that and how to use them to find information that you're looking for. So we're going to be looking at the association tabs right now. 1 second. Is there someone typing? I can hear a lot of typing. All right. We're going to be looking at the association tab, which is used to just see the link between one record and all the other records that are associated to it. So let's look some leases here. This will help you find out what information or where the information you're looking for might be. Not everything, it appears like it's on the lease itself or whatever record you might be looking at, but it might not necessarily be held there and stored there.
Arthur, do people that are not system admin have access to the associations?
At the moment, I believe I only gave it to system admin, but I can expand it to others.
Okay.
If you want, we can make like a report builder security group, something along the lines of that. That way you can give that to those people who will be making reports rather than editing the existing ones, existing security groups, so you don't have any weird overlap, if that works for you.
Yeah.
All right. So just give you some examples here of information that looks like it's on the record, but is actually stored elsewhere. Pretty much anything that looks like a link is usually stored on a different record. For example, the primary location of these leases are, you can click on them and it'll take you to a new record. The information here is linked. It's called a smart section. And it's a connection there. That data isn't actually stored on the lease. It's stored on this property record, which then is brought over to the lease to be displayed. So if I wanted to look at this information, it would be best to look at the association that the lease has to the property and get the information that way. And you can see another example that isn't a smart section where there's information stored and shown on the lease would be these brand details. This is a small little query in itself, a small report in itself that's displayed here that shows associated records. And once again, you click on them and it'll take you to the record where more information is stored. Now, to see these connections and how they are related, at the top here, as Sue mentioned earlier, you might not see it right now if you're not a system administrator, but there will be an associations tab. You can either scroll to the right and find it in the blue tab list, or you can click on this double down arrow and it'll be near the bottom.
So can I just ask you, how come you're seeing the test database in the old skin?
The old skin, I might not have cleared my cache. It could be stored that way. I know I didn't clear my cache rather. That's most likely why.
Okay. Just curious.
And there's
Are you talking about relationships, database relationships here?
Yeah, so this is a simplified way of it, yes. This is like the front-facing way, while in the back it's a lot less distinct, I suppose you could say. This gives you connections based on specific strings to find other records by, which we're going to use in reporting here. So to touch back on what we looked at in the first part, we saw that there is a property record that is associated to this lease, connected and bringing over information. I'm going to open that up so I can show you as I jump back. So let me just open that up, minimize it. All right. Now, this is one of the things that I mentioned the email I sent out last night or early this morning. I can spend forever listing off all the possible connections, but they are best learned and found out through just, tinkering with it. Included a few of what I thought was most important to your immediate use, but this is one of them that I don't believe I had on there. At least I had the connection to it, but I didn't expand from the location onwards. So the property, just looking around, it's a bit unfair because I know where it is, but you can assume that it would be a location, and we can see that the location links to the property. And when we click on that, we see that it is linked to this property, which we can verify here. It usually shows the name. It'll say another field up here if it shows something different. It almost always shows the name. And it shows the same name, and we can verify that. And this is the string that it's used to connect the two. So the way this is applied is the lease itself here, 088-21-1 and so on, has primary location, number 3790 Southwest Marine Drive, for example. And when we would look up information from this property, making the report, we would make sure that we specify this connection string. That way we know exactly what information we're looking for, because some records might have multiple locations associated to them, and so on. So we want to be very specific with this string. Okay. Any questions there? This can be applied to any of these really. It's the same process. Click on it, and like I said, it might take some tinkering to find what you're looking for exactly. The way you can verify this is, let's say, for example, for payment items here, and payments in general, you might not know what it's called back there, so you can open up the payment schedules themselves. You can find the information you're looking for on the lease itself, open it, and go to the System tab. And you can see some of the information about it, such as the business object, the record form. Stuff like this is the information that would help you identify what you're looking for in the Associations tab. Most of these are named pretty straightforward. Some of them can get iffy. Like some of them have very generic containers, if you will. For example, like the clauses, options, and terms are contained within items. This is something that, again, you would just, tinkering with it, you would eventually learn, but I did outline them in that document I sent. All right, so using the Associations tab again, this is how you learn how the records are connected and which association strings you would be using to look up information from the lease, in this case. All right, next we're going to see, we have the information now, we know, no worries, we know how it's connected. Now let's bring up that property once again. We know on the property what we're looking for, but the names don't always match up for the fields. Let's say, the region sometimes, or any field really, sometimes doesn't have the same exact name when you're picking it out from the report maker. It has the TRIRIGA defined name, not the label you see here. So if we need to find all that information, we can use the form builder, which is the area that is used to actually put these forms together and choose their layout and so on. And once again, this is currently only available to System Administrator, so only those with that access will be able to see it. But once again, it's something that we can give. All right. So when you have Form Builder access, you'll get this Tools tab to appear. And you won't see all of this. You should see just Form Builder, maybe Document Manager, a few other little things. But within this Form Builder, we can use that list for immediate reference right now. This would be the best way to find out what you're looking for. That related objects list here. Let me bring it up. You can use that to look up the modules and business objects, or you can also use the associations tab again. So I'm going to use the association tabs this one just to show you how the process would go for like a new, something you don't know where it is. Once again, click on the property here. I'm going to open it and go to the System tab. Find out some information about where this form might be kept. And we see that is a business object of property, and which we learned is in location when looking at the association tab on the lease. So if we look for within the form builder on the left-hand side here, if we look for location, in here we should see property and others. So we see that there are a lot of forms that use the business object of property. Let me see if I can sort this. Doesn't look like it. Okay. So we're getting into the back end, and things might not necessarily be, as straightforward. We see that we're looking for the record form of property, and I believe this is custom. So custom things, once again, are prefaced with the HTZ prefix. So we see Hertz property here. And you'll see this a lot throughout the system when looking through the form builder here. Since we find the form we're looking for.
Is
Yeah.
the business object telling me that the table that it's in?
Yeah, basically. Yes, literally, actually, yeah. That's where the it gets the columns from.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Columns or fields.
And what you're trying to tell us right now is, let's say we're looking up something on the property. This is how we go about finding the actual name for the property, which is the Hertz property. And then the object is telling us where that is actually stored.
Right, yep. So yeah, all of these share different forms, all these properties. These are all forms, so they're all just visual ways to view the data stored in the property table. And if there's anything custom, that's what's in use. Pretty much you can assume that. All right, well, with that open, we will see a pretty much the same view you'd see if you just opened up regularly. Looking at the property, it's very similar. You can see, like, here's a property, and here's the form builder view. Instead of the tabs at the top, these are the tabs here on the left. Again, this is it's in the same order for the most part, and it uses a little bit of different names, but you can click on any of these and see that the label here is general. So general is pretty easy. Let's pick one that's not very straightforward. So distribution. Click on it. You can see that even though it's called try distribution here, the label in itself is actually notifications. So we can go back into the property record and see that there is no try distribution tab, but there is a notifications tab. So you can see the connection there. Now let's say we were looking for, on this property tab, we can go back to the general tab once more. Say we wanted to look up how many parking spaces we have, but we weren't sure what it's called when we're making the report. So we found the form like we just did. We open it up and we find the general tab. And click on it. And we find that field that we're just not sure what it's called. Again, parking spaces. So click on it and we can see it's selected, it's highlighted. And you'll see that the left-hand side expands with a lot more details. These details are the sections within this tab. So you can see there's an attention tab, or attention section, a general section, details, and so on. And each of these sections are outlined on the left-hand side. Anything that's selected is highlighted. So
Okay.
you can see that, yes.
Sorry, Arthur, can you just go back and just show us how you got into that screen again?
This one here?
Yeah.
Yep. So the form builder will be kept on the Tools tab.
So form
Let me get there. Yep. You'll see Form Builder, and you should see a few others on there. But Form Builder is the one we're looking for. And when we use the Association tab, we learn that the properties are kept in the location. So on the left-hand side here, we're looking for location. And then from here, we can see that there are a lot of properties. You see property everywhere. So this left-hand side here is the name of all the forms. The middle section is the label of the forms, which usually is the same thing you see on the left-hand side without the prefix. And the right-hand side is business object, which is where it's pulling the columns and fields that it uses. So we're looking for the property, and if you see a custom one, in this case we do see one for Hertz property, that is going to be the one you're looking for. Otherwise you use the existing try one. Now even if this keeps the layout the same, so it would look, when you click on it and open it, it looks like you're looking at the exact form you'd be looking at if you just opened up a property itself.
Yeah, great, thank you.
Yep. So yeah, so we were looking for parking spaces open. We just weren't sure what it's called when you're making a report. So if you click on it, we see that first of all, it selects the field on the left-hand side and shows us the full name. Basically, it is the name of the field in the database. See that here. And then also on the left-hand side, might scroll down for some reason, but you'll see very detailed information about the field as well. You'll see, again, the name. You'll see the label, what it appears to be labeled as on the form, like the user-friendly view, if you will, and what kind of field it is. This is a number field. That's pretty much all the information you would need from this section. There are a few other things here, if it's visible or not. Some of this stuff, even though you see it on the screen, it isn't visible on like the property itself when you look at it. For example, this attention section only shows up when there's a problem, and so on. So you might see a little extra stuff. All right. So this is how you would look up, fields that you don't know the name to, but you can see like on a record where they are. And that process, once again, is identifying how that record is associated using the Association Manager, finding out what kind of record it is using the System tab, and then looking up the form via the form builder with the information you learned from the System tab and finding the field then. Now, to apply all of this, we can build some reports. Before we get there, any other questions about how to use this tool? Any best practices? First thing I'd recommend is don't change anything. Unfortunately with this, if you get access to it, you're allowed to change things. So that would be, I would keep access to this only in test, just so you can see, because in test and production, they will match, excuse me. So you can look it up in test and apply in production.
Is there any way of giving access to this as read-only?
No, if you have access to the form builder, you have access to use the form builder.
Okay.
Yeah, this is one of the things that it is reserved for, building things, obviously. But it is the best way to identify what fields you're looking for when you have no idea what they're called, simply put. Okay, so we can just jump right into actually making some reports and showing how we would use this process in finding out information that we're looking for. That sound good?
Uh-huh.
All right, so we'll stick with properties because it's the first one that Sue mentioned to me in her email, and it's one that we actually are familiar with now. In this case, though, we're going to be starting with the property being the base of our report. I'll show you this there. So we're going to make a new report. Same process as before. We'll go to System Reports and just New. We will make a name for it. Hertz dash. I know what this is called. Hertz dash try property, or you can just put property. It's really all up to you. And we're looking up properties that have no lease. Oops. And for the title, I like to just copy this down here. Tag, we can put custom or whatever you'd like. And I like to do query. Report and query are effectively functionally the same thing, but queries show up for use in workflows. So I always use query personally, so I can usually use it later in a workflow if I have to. But it doesn't really matter. If you're not going to be using it in a workflow, just stick with reports. Oops, so I'll stick with report. We're going to set our data scope to all projects. All projects, once again, includes all information with the system. We want this to show up as a community report. And then we need to add the try property itself. Oops. There we go. So in the module we learned, again, this is in the location. So we'll find location under module. And then try property, or just property, right here. And the form, if we choose all for the form, this would pick every field that exists on both the property records and retail center records. Since we want to stick with, since custom specifically, we want to stick with the custom setup and limit to the fields only on the Hertz property record for the moment. So we click OK after selecting the form. We see that it adds there. Now, so you said you have, you want to find properties that have no lease and that also which may be terminated, right?
No, the leases that might be terminated. So what I'm trying to do is I want a standard report so that we can run it on a regular basis just to check that if people have terminated leases, they've also retired the properties.
Okay, so if we see, probably should clarify this first, and I apologize. We want to check that properties that have no lease. Okay, so we want to see only if they're terminated. We don't want to see properties that actually don't have any lease tied to them. Those aren't actually the issue. We just want to make sure that if it's terminated, the location is retired.
Yeah, so any property that either has no lease or has a terminated lease.
Okay, we can do that. So once again, we'll stick with the property here. And we're going to we'll minimize the report now because we need to go find out the connection that property has to the lease. We will go find some properties under portfolio. I do apologize, I don't know everyone's access on here. This is, if you have access to properties, this is where they are. And again, this is something we can give specifically for report builders security if we need to. So under portfolio, we can find properties under locations once again.
Yeah, we've all got access to properties.
Okay. And we'll pick the one we were looking at earlier. And it happens to be the first one on the list. So we know that properties have connections to leases, some way, shape, or form. There might not be a connection immediately displayed on the property itself, but we know the lease has a connection to the property from the lease. So we can be sure that there's a connection within the associations tab. And we know now, since we are looking for the lease, we are looking for a contract. So we can see try contract here. And you can see try real estate contract. So that would be a lease. So now we see that the contract, the real estate contract, is connected to the property via the primary location for string. So now that we know that, we can minimize this, keep that information, and open back up our report, and add a new business object. Excuse me. This time we're adding the contract. So let's look for try contracts, and we're looking for try real estate lease or just real estate contract. And the associated options is where we find that string. Clicking on it, you'll get a very vast list. We know that we're looking for primary location for. So if you click on it and just start typing, it will search for that. So I'm just going to start typing primary. So we see a whole list of primaries here. We can scroll down. Oops, too far. All right. See all the primaries, and eventually we see primary location 4. Select that, and this ensures us that we will only bring up the leases that are tied to the property via this string. Sometimes there could be other ones in there that were connected like for historical reasons. We want to make sure those are excluded, or they might be old locations or old contracts, excuse me, and so on. So we want to make sure we define this association type so we only get the contract that is associated. The form defaults to all because we're looking up all fields within that table. Once we have all that set, we can save it, and we can move on to selecting some fields and then filtering down our results. So we want to know properties that, so we're looking for like the address and the name and the status these things are in, correct? Some basic information?
Yeah, I mean lease ID.
Yeah.
Be useful.
So,
maybe lease ID, city, and status.
Sure. So we'll start with the property itself. We'll get some information from there. I always like to include the ID first. Personal preference, once again, you don't have to include that. ID, then we'll grab the name. We can get some, you said city, state, and so on. Okay. City, country, and is there an address? I'm probably in the name. Bring the address in as well, though. All right. So with these fields added for the property, I like to change the labels that show up here to make sure I understand that they're from the property, because when I go to the real estate contract and select name there, I'll have 2 that say name, and it'll be misleading. So I'll just label these as property. And once I have all those labeled, I can click on the contract here in the top left, and I'll change my field selection to that. Excuse me, I forgot the status. I click on back on location there, and we're going to pick the status. Add property in front of that again. All right, moving on to the contract. Once again, I will pick ID, name, and you want the address and country and so on for this as well. City, country.
Yeah, and the status.
State. Yep. All right. And once again, I will label these with what they are. So I can put just RE, simplicity. At least we know that what they are and that they're different. All right, so now we have our field selected, and you can always add more. You can change the order that they're in if you click on these and move up, move down, and so on. Saved. We can move on to filtering down our results. Now we want to check, we're interested in checking that all retired properties have terminated leases, correct? And all properties that are retired don't have any lease, or looking at it backwards here, I'm sorry.
Yeah, we want to make sure that any active properties
Gotcha.
don't have retired or don't have terminated leases.
Okay.
No leases. So we want to use it as a clean-up really, so that we can make sure that people haven't forgotten to retire properties.
Gotcha. So we're going to look up basically any property that isn't retired then, and see if they're connected to anything, any lease that is terminated or not connected to a lease at all. And we will do that by making sure we're in the property, and we will find the status field. We'll do a system filter. And in this case, I would use the not in or not equals, depending on if you're looking for multiple values. I like using not in because it's very strict and lets me add multiple values if I need to. So we want to see if it's not in retired. So if it's anything besides retired, active, revision in progress, review in progress, draft, and so on. And once again, we surround that with single quotes, and we capitalize the R because we know it's capitalized on the records. So we want to include all the properties that are not retired. We want to see if there are any of them that have real estate contracts that are terminated, or they do not have any real estate contracts. So we will, the status field here, let me jump back actually, because the real estate contracts have two status fields. So there is the status and the contract status, and we're interested in the contract status here, not the actual TRIRIGA status, if you will, correct?
No, we're interested in the system status.
And the system status is retired for terminated leases, right?
No, it's terminated for leases.
Right, let me double check.
This is retired for properties.
Right. So if you look up,
You have to look in the terminated leases for that.
right, so we want to look up the contract status though, not the system status. Whoops.
No, we want to look up the system status.
System status uses like active, revision in progress, and retired.
Correct. No, it uses active, revision in progress, and terminated.
Yeah. Terminated is used on the contract status, not the system status.
No, but for terminated leases, it's used in the system status as well.
Oh, look at that. Okay. My apologies, I misunderstood then. Okay. Then we will look up that. That works too. Whoops. All right. So we don't need to worry about that. So we need to see if any active and open properties have any leases that are retired. So we'll click on real estate contract, try contract here, and we will find the status field once more. It's in alphabetical order, and we can add it as a system filter. And we can once again do an in this time, because we're looking up two values. We want to see if anything is in the terminated status. And we also want to see if anything has no status. So this is something that it looks up an empty value, a null value. We see that I just put two quotes, two single quotes right next to each other with nothing in between. This will bring up results that are empty if there are any. So we're looking up, once again, we're looking up properties that are in the status, or not in the status of retired, and real estate contracts that are in the status of terminated or no status. If there is no status, that means there is no lease associated to that property. Understand? Missed something. Okay, well, let me do that. I'll show another way to do that then. All right. So for now, just show how this one looks. We can see that we have about 630 results where there are properties that are active, but they are connected to terminated real estate contracts. And we see that we actually have some duplicates, at least immediately right here. So that means that this this lease, or excuse me, this property, 026, 01, 11, has been tied to many different real estate contracts. They're their primary location for it. So if we, didn't mean to click on that just yet. If we actually click on it, we'll be taken to the property. No matter what you click on here, you will always be taken to the property record because that is our base object that we looked up. You can click on the real estate. It's the real estate contract name itself, and it'll still take you to the property. So clicking on that, we're now at the property, and we can verify that our query is working correctly by going to the Associations tab and going to the contracts and the real estate contracts and seeing that this property is actually the primary location for many different contracts. Just to make sure you know if you see any odd results, you can verify it this way. Now it might look like duplicates, but we can see that there is actually different information over on the right-hand side here. And if you wanted to compile this up by property, since that's our base object, we can use the order and grouping tab. And we can just group by, say, property ID, just make it simple.
Yeah, I'm not sure running it this way is going to give us what we want, because all those properties will also be linked to an active lease, but it's the ones that are not linked to an active lease is what we want to get to, so I'm not sure the filters are the right way around.
Okay, so oops, close it. One moment. Right. We can also add more filters to it. I believe we can also add so if there's going to be multiple results, we can exclude all of those that we can try excluding all of those that do have an active one as well. Simply by since we can't add another system filter on the left-hand side here, just by clicking on it, you would select the already chosen system filter and copy it.
Yeah, I'm not sure that what we don't want to do is look at the filter for the where the filter operator is not inactive, as opposed to terminated.
Sure.
So we want to exclude any properties with active leases, if you see what I mean.
Yes, I gotcha. All right, so we have the grouping on there, which doesn't give us a result count, just so you're aware. But we see that for the property ID of 008900, we see 3 properties that match our filters, or 3, excuse me, real estate contracts for this one property. Now, if we take off this order and group, we can get a number. And yeah, this is a limitation of TRIRIGA. If you use any grouping, it won't perform any counts. You see that we included more statuses, so we have more results. And so what I think here is this will take some tinkering and whittling to make sure we probably still want to use the in status. That way we can specifically exclude like history, because these are basically just revisions. We don't need to include those. And
review in progress.
Yeah, it's like I said, that would be tinkering. And if you want, we can keep doing that with this report now. Otherwise,
No,
this is a good base, and we can move on to something else.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Let's see, we can move on to something else. Yeah.
Sure. Let me copy this name down so I can send it.
You have to recreate it in production anyway.
Yeah. All right. So let's see what else. So let's see, subleases that have no head lease. Do you want to just go in order here, or is there something that you want to do?
Because that's going to be pretty similar to the first one. So I mean, things like rent information and square foot information we're struggling with because that always produces multiple lines on reports.
Okay. So for rent information, can you lead me to exactly which information you're talking about?
Well, for example, if we wanted to write a report that says what is the current rent for per month or per year for all of our leases, how would we go about do that? Because obviously we've got multiple payment schedules.
Yeah. So that definitely can be done, but it's going to be some hard-coded parameters, if you will, because you've used your BERT reports, and you know how sometimes, depending on the report, it asks you for parameters in the beginning, right?
Yeah.
With TRIRIGA, we can get sums that show the yearly and monthly report or totals for payment schedules and payments, but we would have to hard code those actual parameters into the report itself rather than selecting them at runtime. So it can be done if you'd like to go through it. It's going to be strict for certain time frames, though. So you'd have to make a report for, say, each month of the year in 2015 if you use the report in TRIRIGA. Definitely can be done. That one is honestly better suited for BERT.
Okay. All right. Well, maybe try something easier then. Maybe let's try doing a report with putting the square footage in.
Sure. And square footage is these here?
No,
it's
the ones in the premise locations, the unit and unit type.
Right. So we're looking for the rentable, usable, all of this here, and then units, the unit types?
No, it's the unit, just the unit and unit type.
Okay, just these two then? Sure. All right. So we know now, going back to the beginning, that this information is linked to the lease. We can click on it within the lease and be taken there. And we will use the System tab to identify what we're looking for. We see that we're looking for the business object of intermediate. We're looking for, RE contract locations. So if let me move my GoToMeeting over, minimize this contract location and go back to the lease and navigate to the Associations tab, we can begin looking for this connection. We're looking for intermediate as a business object. So we see intermediate, and it's probably within there. And then contract locations. And we see, again, this is the name. If I open this up, we see that this is a premise name here. This is something that we actually changed before. The name that it uses in the system is actually the ID. So we can verify that this is the same record. And we see that it's connected using the string has location area. So the real estate contract is connected to this location here that we have selected with the string of has location area. So I'll just minimize that so I can keep it open and always come back to it if I need to. We will go to our reports, start a new one. So we're going to be using the real estate contract as our base. And we'll call it leases with just area information. How about that? Something simple. And we will label it custom. We will leave it as report. And always change your data scope to all projects if you want to make sure you control or see all the data. And if you want to show the community report, check that off. And let's add our contract, which is our base, because we're looking for the connection from the lease to that location. So contract, real estate contract. There we go. There's quite a few of them in here. So looking through this list, make sure you select the one that's labeled real estate lease if that's what you're looking for. Click OK. And we already looked up the connection to that. So once again, to this record here, which is in real estate contract location, we looked and learned that it is connected through the intermediate module and then the real estate contract location. Using the string has location area. We will add another business object. We're looking for intermediate under module. And under business object, we're looking for RE contract locations. Oh, I just saw it. Here we go. RE contract locations, and I believe it was has location area. Yep. And under associated option, we just start typing has location area, and you can type the whole thing out with spaces, and it eventually will come up. Click OK to confirm that. You can save it, and we can move on to get some fields. Now, we're not sure. We can assume that we know that the unit will be called the unit in the back end, and the unit type will be called unit type. There's no guarantees. We can always look first when we're making the report and see if it comes up there. So if we go to the columns, let's get some information about our contract first. I'll do them in order as I see them. City, country. You can sort them afterwards. ID, name, and status. You can label them however you'd like. There might be duplicates that you want to bring in on the other information that you're looking up. And say we don't want them in this order. I want the country at the bottom, along with the city, but I do want the status to stay at the bottom as well. So now I have ID, country, city, status. We'll move city before country. I'm moving it up. All right, now I'm happy with the contract information. We can move on to the contract locations and see if we can easily identify the unit and unit type, which luckily they keep the same names here. So yeah, we can add them pretty easily. Unit and unit type. Added them right in the middle, so let's move those to the bottom. And these pretty unique, but I like to label information so I can always tell it apart. RE location units, unit type. That information, we can see if it brings it up. Let's see here. Anything else you wanted to get from here before we run it? Just the unit and unit type?
Yeah, I think that's all.
All right, let's run it. Now we're not doing any filtering, so we will have a lot of results. And we can see that there are some, these are retired, but there are some that don't have any, the unit's 0 and they don't have a unit type selected. You'll get results like that. You can always set up filters, filter those out, or you might find ones that have, 1 and then no unit types and so on. Yeah, with some filtering, you could probably filter out ones you don't want to see or filter ones you definitely do want to see, ones that might be problematic and so on. Was there any specific units and unit types that you're trying to find, or you just want to see all of them?
No, it was just how to get them onto the report, but obviously it's going to return multiple lines again, so...
Right.
Can we sum them, or...?
That's an interesting question, actually, because they use different unit types. I'm not entirely sure. location unit, we can sum, see what happens. So it's summing them by, if we have to have grouping, here, let me add some grouping. So this would probably look much better if you pull that out into Excel. Is everyone else's phone beeping, or is that just me?
Yeah, no, it is beeping.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, not sure why that's happening. I apologize. 1 second. Let me see if there's something in GoToMeeting. Apologize. 1 moment. It looks like it's coming from Jennifer. You there, Jennifer?
Jennifer has stepped up. She actually just sent me a quick text. She ran to the restroom.
So let me try.
She must have, maybe she put her phone on hold.
I muted her. Let's see if it
Oh,
goes
that
away.
could be it.
All right. Okay. I muted her. It seems to be okay. So in this case, we don't have any separation from unit type, though, but it does sum them. So you probably want to set up different reports based on unit type.
Yeah. Yeah, we can do that. That's fine. We can just filter on the unit type.
Yep.
Okay.
So I have a question. So that means you can either select the type square meter or select the type parking spaces, but you have to create 2 different reports, correct?
In this case, yes. Yep.
Okay.
Because these are 2 separate fields. I believe this was custom, right, Sue? I believe this is something Leto put together.
Yeah, it is, but surely what you could do is you could put the same fields on twice and then in one column select square feet and the other column select parking spaces.
Well, definitely, yes.
So you could do it that way, Christina. So you don't have to just have the one column, or you could have three lots of columns. So it depends what you've got.
Well,
you're just using square feet or square meters and parking spaces, and that's all you want to look at.
Mm.
The
do it that way. Do you want to?
The filtering happens.
Show them. Can you just show them that, Arthur?
Yeah, I think I'm getting what you're saying now, and the filtering happens query-wide on those fields, not column-wide. So if you filter out, say, square feet, it's going to happen for the entire query, not for a specific column.
Okay.
So you'd have to limit it to 1 unit type.
Per
I think
report.
that's just due to the way this was built. There are, and it's 2 separate fields. Normally, you can see here, like the rentable area here is defined by a unit of measure. If you could include these if you wanted to.
We've not completed them.
Right.
In most cases.
Yeah. Yeah. So in this case, due to the way this is currently set up, you would have to use multiple reports based on this unit type. Okay. So we discussed rent information. You said subleases is similar to the properties that have no lease, so that was pretty much covered. The only one we didn't talk about was buildings that are not attached to properties. Is that something you'd like to look at?
Well, I mean, is there anything that any of the other guys want to look at that they've got specific requirements for?
That would actually be a good one. I understand the concept. We have properties, and we probably are pretty safe in having buildings associated with it. But it would be nice to know if there was an exception to that, so it does make sense to look at that.
Yeah, I mean, most of this is going to be driven by where people have actually made input errors, and then we can just clean up the system.
That's what I was thinking. And we went through the TRIRIGA cleanup here recently, So I would say that it's pretty safe that we're not going to have many properties without buildings, but we should definitely know if we do.
Yeah.
So, and that's your thinking too, right? So,
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Unit. Oh boy. Okay. I can get that. All right. So if my understanding is right, we are looking up. So every building should be attached to a property, right?
Right.
Is it
Yeah.
true both ways? So every property should have a building as well?
Yeah.
Or is,
Uh-huh.
okay.
Yeah, because if there's no,
I would assume so.
except for the, I guess except for the owned properties. The owned properties are probably not going to have buildings, but that will be an interesting one to look at.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's two different ways to tackle this, and then we can start from the building side itself, or we can start from the property side itself. If we start from the building side, we're only going to get properties that have buildings, because we can't look up something that doesn't exist, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So if we start from the property side, we'll also get properties that don't have buildings.
That would probably be the best of the scenarios, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I would have thought so.
Properties that don't have buildings. And there's some, I'm just thinking out loud, but isn't there the potential for some properties to legitimately not have buildings, like parking lots?
Well, if they've got a lease, you would have to have a building in order to put it into the locations tab into the lease.
Yep. Okay, you're right.
So it would only potentially be the owned properties that may not have had buildings set up.
And otherwise, it's an error.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. So what I'm getting from this, it is the we should start properties and look up any properties that have missing buildings based on whether they're owned or not.
Yes. So we need to include the tenure.
Sure. And we'll start with properties. So to try property. And do we want to see those with buildings or without buildings? How would you best describe this? Because we can see obviously both. Properties and
properties associated with buildings.
Yeah, that's a good one. You can do that.
Because the exceptions are the ones that we will find. That's what we want to find.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So again, let's add our property, and we'll go look up a property then and see how they're connected to a building. So property and our custom form of Hertz property. Make sure we get all of our pertinent fields. Save that real quick. And we'll set all other settings when we come back. We just need to check out their connection first. All right, portfolio and properties once again. Now you said we want to make sure we open the leased property because owned properties might not have a building, correct?
Correct, yes.
So I'll pick one that's leased. And we see it has a primary address, which is usually tied to a building. So go to the associations, and the building, if you look here, the building would either probably be geography or location. It would be location. We can see that there is a TRI building. We see that it is tied to the same building, it looks like, by parent for or is parent of. We can use either one. It looks like they both mean the same thing. So also to clarify, this is a good example of what would happen if you didn't pick a specific string. This is where you get two results that look like duplicates, but they aren't necessarily duplicates. All right, so let's
just a little heads up to Jen has returned to her phone, so you can possibly take off. Yes. Sorry to interrupt you there.
We can allow her to talk again.
Yeah, that's right.
All right, Jennifer should be unmuted. Okay, so yeah, we'll leave this up and just keep it up for reference. Let's jump back to that report. We will add our business object. We now know that buildings are under locations. We are conveniently placed back here because properties were locations. So we can select building. And we can do parents. Let's see, is it parent of or parent for? They're too similar. Parent for. We'll do the smaller one. Parent for. Parent for. Perfect. Type it in there and it'll come up as you type. And click OK. Now we have our properties, and we're also looking up locations, or excuse me, buildings, which are also locations, that are connected via the string parent for. So our property is a parent for buildings. Let's make sure we have our other settings correct. So we need to change our scope to all projects. And we'll make this community report as well. Save once more. And we will jump to our columns. So this is when we could probably have a lot of overlapping information due to the addresses and so on. Let's look up the ID. And let's go to the property and actually see what would be good. The ID and the name, and then unless you want to make sure there's no address here. So I'm just looking for what would be decent information.
The address is at the bottom. The address is
yeah. Yep.
Yeah, so just city address and maybe region.
So bring the ID and the name. Our address. Our city.
Country.
And yeah, that's not a bad idea. Country, and then our region. All right, so we have two of them here. It looks like we have a custom one and an out-of-the-box one. You can tell the custom one's labeled with Hertz. Out-of-the-box is labeled with Tri. If you're not sure, I would include both and see which one's which, or you could always check by looking at the form builder. Or if you know, which I don't know for sure, let's check at the form builder. There's no way to tell by looking at region here. If it's this region, I believe there's another region on here as well. I'm mistaken. So we're going to check the form builder, make sure we pick the right one. Tools, form builder. And this is the property, so we're looking at location. And we're looking for the custom property, so Hertz property. And on the general tab, places it here automatically because this is where we were last. We can click on region and see what the name of this region field is. We see that it's the Hertz region, and it's a classification field. So we just need to make sure we select that one in our query. Oops, this one. So yeah, we don't need the one that says Tri-Region TX. We need the one that says Hertz Region CL. Okay. With that, let's add some labels. Property. And we can jump over to the building. Now, did you want to actually include the tenure in the property as well? Not a bad idea, right?
Yes, please. Then we can search on.
Let's put it in property tenure. Okay. Save that, make sure it commits, and we'll jump to the building. For the building, let's get the ID and the name. If I can remember my alphabet here, sorry. ID, name. So the addresses should match up. Did you want to include the address as well? address and the city and so on.
We probably don't
I feel
need
like it'd be
it for the
duplicate.
purposes of this.
Yeah. And then status. Okay, save that and let's filter out some stuff. All right, so first things first is the tenure. We don't need to look at owned tenures, is that correct? We can assume that if they don't have...
I think we should just be interesting to see whether they have got buildings associated.
Okay. Is there anything you'd like to specifically just include? So we're looking for buildings or properties that don't have any buildings attached to them, right?
Yes, but we don't want retired properties.
Gotcha. So let's get rid of retired properties. We'll look up the status, bring it over as a system filter, and we can do not in with our single quotes. Or in this case, let's just do not equals because we've been using not in. So for not equals, we don't need to use quotes, but it is still case sensitive, so we need to capitalize the R. So we're looking at anything that's not equal to retired for that status. Let's see, buildings, and we're looking up, so for building, if you wanted to get anything that, say, doesn't have a building, if we want to, we can include the name in our system filters for the building, or the ID, something that will exist no matter what if a building exists. So I like choosing ID because that's one the system usually fills in. ID. Yep. All right. So if we choose ID equals blank, will bring up properties that have buildings with no ID. Basically, properties that don't have buildings.
Okay.
And it's best to choose a field that you know is always filled in. Usually ID or name is the best choice. I go with ID because that's one that the system fills in by itself. Okay. Did we want to filter by anything else, or is this all right?
I think let's see what it produces, and then we can see if we missed anything.
This is the old report. 1 second. I decided to. So here we see something interesting. We see that there are some buildings with no IDs. So there could be something weird going on there.
Most of them are owned.
Yeah, these are copies as well. Looks like a few of them are. But yeah, so we see something interesting here. This could point out a problem as well, which is what we were looking for. So if we click on it, it'll take us to the property. We see that there is an address, so there should be a building. Let's go to the Associations tab, the locations, and the building. See that there? Oh, so there are properties that have multiple buildings. Okay. In this case, we're looking for, I picked Honolulu, so we're looking for the Honolulu International Consolidated Rental Car Facility. And we can find that in here. I just saw it. This very interesting. It doesn't have an ID. But yeah, so this would be something that I would identify definitely as a problem.
Yeah, because that should be system generated, shouldn't it?
Yeah, and it's filled in with the control number, which is something that no one can interact with. So yeah, this is something that we can mark for cleanup.
Okay.
And we can use this report to find it. And you see that for other examples here, let's see, I'm going to pick one that doesn't have any information. So Atlantic Branch Avenue here.
So that's the report saying that doesn't have any buildings.
Right, it's showing any buildings, yes, because it's not bringing up any information about them. Let's see, yeah, so this one, for example, doesn't have any buildings tied to it.
All right, can you just click on the Includes tab?
Yeah, sure. And there's nothing beneath it here.
Okay.
So go back to the General tab real quick. Can I see something?
Yeah.
I want to see what the property tells us. And doesn't tell us much.
Can you, when
There
we finished looking at that, can we just see if the association, see if there's a lease type of property? Because it could be that the
I'm looking for the
lease has been terminated, but the property hasn't.
Right. So I don't see any.
No lease. So there's no lease.
So this is one that should probably be retired then, right?
Yeah. So I think probably that's something that, you know, Jennifer or Kip needs to have a look at to see any of these which maybe the leases have been terminated, but we've forgotten to do the properties.
Right. Okay. Yeah, and we can see that we have, if you wanted to be very thorough and say separate this report into two different issues, because we do see we have some buildings without IDs, we can also include where the building name is also blank and there is no status and so on. That way we can exclude the ones that look like they are different issues, if you will. But yeah, that's just more filtering that can be done. Alrighty. Any questions here? Any deeper dive you want to do on this one?
Okay, so the basic issue is we need to log on the SharePoint site that we've got all these buildings with no building IDs.
Oh, these properties.
Right. And,
yeah.
And I would, once again, this is in test, so I assume this exists in production, but we can recreate this in production and be doubly sure, at least with what we're working with, because there could be ones that were already repaired and so on. But yeah. All right. So that went through Sue's list. Was there anyone else who had any reports they wanted to see or see if they're possible?
Did you say that you're going to possibly create a security group that non-admins would be able to run reports?
I could if you wanted me to, yes.
Anybody
if you wanted, yeah, go ahead.
Anybody can do reports, Jennifer. They just can't save them into system reports.
Right.
They're not a system admin, so anybody can write reports.
So they just wouldn't be able to save them.
They wouldn't be able to save them, and they wouldn't be able to use the tools that I was describing earlier.
No, you can save them into my reports.
Hmm. I was making reports here from the perspective of making them for other people to use. So I was using system reports.
Our non-admin should be able to use like the total lease liability, correct? The reports that should all be the same. Okay.
And any of the reports that are written in the system that are accessible in community reports, and anybody can run them, even the read-only, read-only security groups. Anybody can run a report.
Okay.
So yeah, system reports are usually created in system reports, and they can be labeled as community reports, and they'll show up in the community tab. And then community reports can be copied down into the My Reports tab using this link in the top right. Copy as My Report. And then users can also create their own reports within My Reports tab that aren't shared with everyone else.
Okay. All right. That's fine.
All right. That's all I have for you guys. Anything you wanted to go over again? I sent out a few things last night and this morning with details about all of the operators that can be used and with examples of the usage and what kind of results they return and so on.
Yeah, and I think that the recordings will be useful because that will just give people the opportunity to go over it again at their leisure.
Yep, and I can actually check that ticket right after this meeting because there's probably an update in it. But yeah, that's all I have for you guys. If there's nothing else, I think we can call it a day.
Okay. I mean, could you and Jennifer stay on the line for 10 minutes? Just I need to check a few support items.
Yeah, that's fine.
Gladly.
Great. Thank you very much, Arthur. I appreciate it.
No
Thank
problem.
you.
Thank you everyone for joining.
Thank you.